Look at this game. Look at this game. Already haven't been here in a hot minute. How's the streaming going? About the same. Under fucking maintenance. All right, guys. It's good seeing you. I'll be back on tomorrow night. What's up, everybody? I'm Failure7X. Welcome back to the channel, or welcome to the channel, I guess. And as you can tell by the title and thumbnail, well, I guess you couldn't really tell that I got into the beta, but yeah, we got into the closed beta of Resident Evil Reverse. So, you know, after playing it for a couple hours, which I know might not sound like a lot, but to me, it was more than enough to see what I needed to see. So yeah, we're gonna go ahead and do a somewhat in-depth reaction, or like critique, maybe, I guess, on the demo. But like I said, it was a closed beta, so most of my issues I'm also, you know, taking with a grain of salt because they could be improved. Overall, though, the game was a little clunky. Like in terms of gameplay mechanics, which isn't really new for Resident Evil games, but it does take away from the gameplay experience. We only got one map, which again, like I said, it was a closed beta, so not really hating on that too much, which for what it's worth wasn't bad, but you know, one map can get pretty stale pretty quick. And in terms of like the map properties or whatever you would call it, the only issue I had there was that the spawns were sometimes too far apart. There were a handful of times where I would spawn in on one side of the map and literally everybody else was on the other side of the map, which, don't get me wrong, isn't necessarily a completely bad thing. I obviously don't want to spawn in and just get immediately blasted, even though we do have invincibility frames for a couple seconds after spawning in. But when you run around for like 30 seconds looking for people, that could be the difference between you taking first place or not. As far as like the premise of the game, or at least in terms of what we got in the beta, it's pretty much a free-for-all that, you know, involves characters from the Resident Evil universe. Realistically though, it's just characters that were already made with the RE engine, because all the characters that we got were characters that, you know, were already made. We got Leon, Claire, Ada, Hunch, and the Super Tyrant from the Resident Evil 2 remake. We got Jill, Nemesis, and the Hunter Gamma from the Resident Evil 3 remake. And then we got Chris Redfield, Jack Baker, and the Fat Molded, which I don't really remember being in Resident Evil 7. Then again, I barely remember yesterday, but yeah, those are from Resident Evil 7. I'm hoping that Chris's model gets replaced with the Resident Evil 8 model whenever that drops, because if you're a fan of the Resident Evil series, you know that the Resident Evil 7 Chris is completely, for lack of better words, just disgusting. But yeah, it's pretty much your standard free-for-all. The only difference is that when you die as a human, you come back as a bioweapon. This is dependent on how many virus capsules you collect during your time alive as a human, at least for that one life. If you collect no capsules, you come back as a Fat Molded. If you collect one capsule, you come back as either the Hunter Gamma or Jack Baker, and if you collect two capsules, you come back as either Nemesis or the Super Tyrant. Which bioweapon you spawn back as also seems to be a little bit random, depending on how many virus capsules you have. So for example, if you have two capsules, whether or not you come back as Nemesis or Super Tyrant, at least as far as I know, isn't up to you. It's just a random selection. To go into the characters a little bit more in detail, starting off, we have Jill, who is one of the best survivors in this beta. She starts off with the Samurai Edge handgun and the QCBR assault rifle. For my Call of Duty subscribers, that's basically the Renetti and the M4. All the survivors come with a passive skill and two active skills, and that's where Jill becomes pretty much top tier. Her passive skill is called Desperation, and it gives a damage buff shortly after dodging. One of her active skills is that she attacks with the Hot Dogger, which is the big flame knife from Resident Evil 3 remake, and this does a lot of damage on its own. Normally, it's just a couple quick slashes, but if you use it immediately after dodging, then the attack becomes a, quote, powerful upward slash. And this is important because not only does it get the damage buff in the active skill itself, but it also gets another damage buff from her passive ability, or her passive skill. And I could be wrong about those two stacking, but I'm pretty sure that's the case because almost every time I used it, it was an instant kill. Plus, it just makes sense that they'd work that way together. Her other active skill is a landmine, which honestly isn't that great, although it definitely does have some usefulness to it. You can use it to funnel people into specific routes that you want, whether so you can set up an ambush or so you can like divert them away from you. But it's also something that you can just place and forget and then randomly do damage or even get a free kill to anyone not paying attention to it. Next up, we got Chris Redfield, and I'm honestly not going to talk too much about Chris because he didn't really stand out to me. He gets the same weapons as Jill, although I'm not sure if they're exactly the same or if his are stronger or weaker. He's definitely a decent character, but his passive and active abilities aren't anything great. He's more of a character that's not really dependent on his abilities, but he's also not really enhanced by them either. Next is Leon Kennedy, and Leon is like Jill in the sense of being a top tier character. He starts out with the Matilda handgun and the W870 shotgun. The handgun I didn't really care about, but the shotgun does an insane amount of damage, and it also kind of stuns the target because of that. Honestly, Leon could probably get around with just a shotgun without his passive reactive abilities, simply because of how good the shotgun is. However, the shotgun is obviously only really viable at close range, but even then the map is small enough where his handgun could be useful at longer ranges if needed. But obviously Leon has abilities, and again, they're kind of broken. His passive is that he recovers HP over time, which is pretty self-explanatory. This leaves you less dependent on finding healing items. His roundhouse kick is good, but it's not really you know, anything crazy. But his dual wield ability is pretty broken. It was a little weird to figure out at first, but once I figured it out, I was just melting people. Even a newly spawned Nemesis or Super Tyrant can just get shredded by Leon's dual wielded handguns. Next up, we have Claire Redfield, and honestly, I'm a little disappointed with Claire. Claire is my favorite character from the Resident Evil series, so I wanted her to be, you know, pretty broken in this game, but sadly that wasn't the case. She starts off with her quick draw army revolver, and then the MQ-11 submachine gun, which, you know, are pretty good. Her passive ability goes with her revolver, because if you dodge, it instantly reloads it, which is nice because otherwise she reloads one round at a time, which is pretty slow. And this could also be set up for more continuous fights. You know, she shoots, rolls, and then instantly able to shoot again. Her one active ability is an adrenaline shot, which gives her back some HP and stamina, which also helps with her passive because the dodging is based on a cooldown. And with the adrenaline shot, you don't have to wait on the stamina to recharge, which again pretty much gives you another free instant reload. Her other active ability is pretty much just a shock grenade that stuns enemies close to it. This paired with her SMG is actually pretty crazy, but overall I didn't feel that Claire was as powerful as Jill or Leon, which could be a good thing because she might already be balanced and we could see Jill and Leon get nerfed. But like I said, I expected Claire to be broken for my own personal reasons. I could also just suck as playing as Claire too, though, so you know, that's another factor to consider. Next we have Ada Wong, and like I said with Claire, I could just be bad at playing as Ada, but if you ask me, Ada's the weakest character out of the 6 that we get. She gets a handgun and her crossbow, which both kind of suck, and her abilities aren't that great either. Her passive ability allows her to get stamina back when her HP reaches critical levels, which practically means as she's dying. For her active abilities, she gets a pipe bomb arrow that, when used, she grapples onto the ceiling and then shoots pretty much an explosive bolt that blows up on impact. And like I said, maybe I just suck, but this was pretty difficult to aim with. You pretty much have to pre-aim where you want to shoot before you use the ability, which is a lot more annoying than it sounds, because it's not like you grapple and then aim and shoot. You have to almost predict where the person's going to be, which, you know, with time could be something that's easily figured out, but I just saw it being more trouble than it was worth. She also has a somersault kick that is very short range and seems to have the majority of the hitbox being behind you, which could be useful, but I don't really see it being useful for most situations. And lastly, we had Hunch, who, if you ask me, is not top tier. Like, I wouldn't place him with Jill and Leon, but he's definitely right below them. He starts off with the MUP handgun and the LE5 SMG, which is basically just the MP5, and these are both pretty decent guns. Hunch also seems to be the only survivor whose 3 abilities are all connected to and enhanced by each other. His first active ability is that he becomes pretty much invisible. You can still see him somewhat, but in the heat of battle, he goes pretty easily undetected. Plus, while in the active camouflage, your footsteps are quieter. His other active ability is called Assassinate, which is pretty much like the sleeve blade thing from the Assassin's Creed series. The range on this is super short, but this almost always one-hit kills people because it gets a damage buff if you're under your active camouflage. And to top all of that off, if you get an assassination kill while camouflage, this extends the duration of the camouflage, so you can stay hidden longer and then keep your assassinate buff longer. So obviously what I meant by his 3 abilities all being intertwined is that you activate the active camouflage, your footsteps are quieter, you can sneak up on people, you use the assassinate ability, which gets a buff for being an active camouflage, and since it almost always one-hit kills people, you pretty much get a free extension of your active camouflage to go and do the same thing over again. This does slightly make him dependent on his abilities, but like I said before, his MP5 still makes him pretty viable without him. Next up we have the bioweapons, and starting off with the Fat Molded. This requires no virus capsules to spawn as, but even with that being said, he's actually pretty good. His self-destruct ability obviously kills him, but if used correctly, it can inflict a lot of damage. The longer you wait and the more damage you take and receive, build up his energy, I think they called it, which pretty much increases the damage when he explodes. His second ability is Enrage, which gives him an attack power, attack speed, and movement speed buff that actually makes him pretty annoying. Next up we have the Hunter Gamma, who only requires 1 virus capsule to spawn as. His 2 abilities are his Devour Bite attack and his Acid Spray Spit attack. Neither of them are that great, but they can be spammed enough to be pretty annoying as well. Then we have Jack Baker, who for some reason also only requires 1 virus capsule, and if you ask me, he kind of feels weaker than the Hunter Gamma. He gets a punch that's a short range attack and a chainsaw scissor whirlwind, which is a pretty corny name if you ask me. He pretty much spins around and uses his chainsaw and hits anything in the circle around him, which, you know, could be good if there's a group of people around, but yeah, I just didn't see him being that strong. He also runs around like he shitted his diaper, so you know, there's that too. Next up we have Nemesis, and Nemi requires 2 virus capsules to spawn as. Even though Nemesis and Super Tyrant both require 2 capsules, I feel like Nemesis is the second best. He's fast as hell, but not as strong as the Super Tyrant. His pursuing tentacle move is pretty much a ground slam that stabs people close by, and his rocket launcher is self-explanatory. Both of these are really good attacks that can again be spammed fairly quickly. Finally, we have the Super Tyrant, aka the Mr. X that Leon fights at the end of his campaign in the Resident Evil 2 remake. And like I said with Nemesis, he requires 2 virus capsules to spawn as, and is easily the strongest bioweapon available. He's not as fast as Nemesis, but he's still pretty quick, and his 2 abilities are pretty strong. His dashing strike attack is where he puts his hand in the ground and then runs at you, and if he hits you, it's like this powerful upward slash, which a lot of the time one-hits people. And even if you don't one-hit kill him, it can be used again pretty quickly, so you know, if you don't succeed the first time, you'll most likely succeed the next time. And his leaping strike attack is exactly what it says it is. You jump forward a bit and like do a ground pound move that does crazy amounts of damage to anyone near you. And yeah, that's it for the characters. For the conclusion, you know, this game, long story short, I didn't think it was terrible. I honestly thought it was better than Resistance. For being included free with Resident Evil 8, it's not that bad. Like I tweeted the other day, the efforts for this should have been put towards something the community wanted, but at least we're not forced to pay for it, like with the Resident Evil 3 remake and Project Resistance. Resident Evil 3 should have been a DLC expansion for RE2, but even for the sake of argument, as a standalone game, it was only worth about $30 to $40 tops. And with that being said, we were pretty much forced into spending the $20 or so on Resistance because Resident Evil 3 was a $60 game. But yeah, Reverse pretty much just feels like a side project that was made simply because they had assets laying around, which isn't entirely a bad thing. While some people could complain that, you know, it's all reused assets and nothing new, I could argue as that being a good thing. Yeah, sure, a completely new project would be nice, but at the same time, that would require a lot of time and resources. With them reusing available assets, most of the work is already done for them. So like I said, with the efforts of this being better suited elsewhere, the recycling of available assets allows this project to require very little resources, and the resources saved by reusing assets are additional resources that could be allocated to RE8 or future RE titles that we don't know about yet. Plus, you know, being a game that's based on assets readily available from other games, this could actually increase the lifespan of this game. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if we get characters from Resident Evil Village, because again, those assets are already created, so all they would have to do, I mean, I'm not going to discredit the work that goes into making a game, but I feel like, to put it in the simplest terms, they could pretty much just drag and drop Resident Evil Village characters into Reverse instead of having to go and remake completely new models and assets. Again, it's obviously a little bit more work than that, but likewise with the Resident Evil 4 remake that's rumored, they can just add the assets made for that game into Reverse as well as DLC or whatever. As far as improvements go, honestly, aside from just a smoother gameplay experience, the only real improvement that I could suggest that might prolong the life of this game is just a bunch of content. I know I just said them reusing assets that are already made could be a good thing, but given the premise of the game, I would also like to see a bunch of characters that aren't already on the Resident Evil engine or the RE engine. Like I said, I'm assuming since it's dropping alongside RE8, we might see characters such as Ethan or the Resident Evil 8 Chris, and maybe even some tall lady action. But even further than that, they can bring in old characters like Rebecca, Wesker, Krauser, Barry, not Ashley, Sheva, Verdugo, Vector, and yeah, you get the point. I guess though, to summarize everything one final simple time, for a free add-on with Resident Evil 8, this isn't bad. It's just dumb fun with characters that we know and love, and as long as you don't go into this with insane expectations, you'll be fine. The only other thing I ask is just for smoother gameplay and an insane amount of new characters and maps and whatever else. Again though, this was a closed beta, so there's not really too much to go off of. This video is already probably way longer than I anticipated, but I said most of what I wanted to say. I probably forgot some things, but whatever. So yeah, I guess let me know what you think of the game, especially if you got into the beta. Let me know if you think it's salvageable or a complete waste of time, or you know, what you'd like to see out of it. I know people want Outbreak, I get it. I've been begging for a new Outbreak, and even further than that, a Dino Crisis remake for forever now, so I feel your pain on that, but you know, it is what it is, so let's just try to be fair and work with what we have. But yeah, before we go though, as always, if you're new here or haven't yet already, don't forget to hit subscribe. I normally say for more Call of Duty related content, but with Resident Evil Village just around the corner, I'm obviously going to be having a lot more Resident Evil content. I don't know how much I'll play Reverse, but I definitely enjoyed it enough to play it when it comes out, unlike Resistance. But yeah, I'll also be streaming Resident Evil 8 when it comes out, as well as any other Resident Evil game, to be honest. So with that being said, my Twitch link will be in the description, as well as my links to anything else. But yeah, I feel like I've been talking for an eternity now, so I'm gonna end the video here. I'm Failure7X, thank you for watching. Knock it off me. Oh, I'll also have Failure7X Resident Evil inspired merch, and then links below too, so yeah, go buy some merch.